They're going to call you selfish. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing something they needed. You stopped answering at midnight. You stopped explaining yourself for the 100th time. You stopped going back. And somewhere, right now, someone is telling a version of your story where you are the villain. Maybe it is a parent telling a cousin you have changed. Maybe it is an ex telling mutual friends you got cold. Maybe it is only in your own head, a voice that sounds suspiciously like someone else's. Here is what nobody tells you about healing. It does not feel like peace at first. It feels like guilt. It feels like betrayal even when you have done nothing but protect yourself. Carl Jung spent his life studying why the human mind punishes people for growing. And the answer is not comforting. It is the reason you are still checking your phone, still rehearsing the apology you do not owe. It is the reason a part of you keeps drafting the message you know you should never send. It is the reason your chest tightens every time their name shows up on a screen. If you do not understand this mechanism, you will keep mistaking your own survival for cruelty. And you will go back, again, and again, until the same wound reopens in a slightly different shape, wearing a slightly different face, using slightly different words that mean exactly the same thing. By the end of this video you will understand exactly why that happens, and exactly what it takes to stop it for good. You have probably already tried the obvious things. Blocking, unblocking. Writing the letter you never send. Promising yourself at 2 in the morning that this time is different. None of that failed because you were weak. It failed because nobody explained the actual mechanism underneath the pull. That changes today. Not because you are about to get a script to recite at anyone. Because once you actually see the mechanism clearly, the pull loses a good part of its power over you. Real healing is not forgiving and forgetting. It is not closure, that word people use when they want the pain to disappear without doing the work of actually changing. Real healing is developing the capacity to not return, even when every emotional signal in your body is screaming at you to. Growth does not ask your permission before it changes who you can be around. It just happens. One day the people who used to feel like home start to feel like a room with no air in it. You do not choose this consciously. Your nervous system does it for you quietly while you are busy calling yourself dramatic for noticing. This is not coldness. This is not selfishness. This is your psyche doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protecting a structure that is still being built. And the moment you understand that, the guilt starts to lose its grip, one small inch at a time, one unanswered call at a time. Think about a plant that has outgrown its pot. Nobody accuses the roots of being dramatic when they crack the ceramic. Nobody calls the plant selfish for needing more room than it was given. We understand instantly that outgrowing a container is not an act of aggression against the container. Somehow, when it is a human being instead of a plant, and a relationship instead of a pot, we forget that same basic logic. We start treating the roots as the problem instead of recognizing that the container simply stopped being big enough a long time ago. This video is not going to tell you to cut everyone off. It is going to show you why the pull to go back exists in the first place, and why the strongest thing you can do, again and again, is stay in the discomfort of not answering it. Stick with this to the end because there is a specific moment later in this video where the whole thing clicks. Where the guilt stops making sense and something quieter takes its place. Jung called this process individuation. It is the long, uncomfortable process of becoming a separate self, instead of a reflection of everyone else's expectations. Here is the part that matters for you. Individuation does not just change how you think. It changes who fits. Think about a relationship that used to feel safe. But only if you stayed small inside it. Only if you agreed, apologized, adjusted, shrunk. That was never intimacy. That was a role you were cast in before you were old enough to say no to the script. Jung worked with patients who described exactly this. A suffocating sense that their whole personality had been built around someone else's comfort. He called the mask they wore for that purpose the persona. A persona is not a lie exactly. It is a survival costume. You built it because somewhere being fully yourself was too dangerous, too disruptive, too much for the room you were standing in. Maybe it was too much for a parent who needed you agreeable. Maybe it was too much for a partner who needed you smaller than they were. Maybe it was too much for a friend group that only had room for one real personality at a time, and it was not yours. And it worked. For years maybe it worked perfectly. Until it did not. Individuation is what happens when the self underneath that costume gets too big to keep hiding. It presses against the mask from the inside, quietly, then insistently, then impossible to ignore. It makes old rooms feel small. It makes old people feel like strangers wearing familiar faces. This is not a malfunction. This is not you changing for the worse. This is the most honest thing that has happened inside you in years. Every relationship that only worked because you performed a smaller version of yourself was never built to survive your growth. It was built to survive your silence. And when the silence ends, so does the illusion that held it together. That is not a tragedy. That is the exit door finally opening, whether anyone else is ready for it or not. Notice something here because it explains almost everything that comes next in this video. The people who benefited most from your persona are usually the ones who fight hardest to keep it in place. Not out of malice, out of habit. They fell in love with the costume, not the person underneath it, because the costume never asked them to change. Individuation asks them to meet the person underneath it, and most people were never prepared for that conversation, so they reach for the easiest thing available. They call the change a betrayal instead of what it actually is. Ask yourself honestly for a second. How many relationships in your life were built on the real you? And how many were built on the version of you that made things easy for someone else? That question is not comfortable. It is not supposed to be. But it is the exact question individuation forces you to sit with, whether you are ready for it or not. Some relationships will survive that question easily. Others were only ever standing because you never asked it out loud before. Now here is where I want you to pause, not to scroll, to actually sit with this for 1 second. Write this down somewhere, a note, a caption, anywhere you will see it again. I am not obligated to stay reachable to people who only loved the version of me that hurt. Say it slower than you think you need to. Say it again if the first time did not land. Say it a third time if you noticed yourself flinching. Because the next part explains exactly why that sentence feels so hard to believe, even when you already know, somewhere underneath the guilt, that it is true. There is a difference between being intelligent and being conscious. Intelligence lets you understand, in words, that a relationship was toxic. Consciousness is what lets you actually stay away from it. Most people are painfully intelligent about their own pain. They can describe the pattern in perfect detail, almost like reciting it from memory, complete with dates, with exact phrases, with the tone of voice that was used against them. They know exactly what was said, exactly what it did to them, exactly why it was wrong, exactly which sentence cut the deepest. And they go back anyway. This is the gap almost nobody talks about, the space between knowing and living differently. Knowing is cheap. Consciousness is expensive. Jung believed that real psychological growth is not about collecting insight. It is about integrating it until the insight lives in your body, not just your vocabulary. An intelligent person can explain a wound perfectly and still keep touching it. A conscious person feels the old pull and does not move. That gap is where most healing quietly dies, in the space between a good therapy session and a lonely Tuesday night when the apartment is too quiet and the phone is too close. People mistake understanding for transformation. They think because they can name what happened to them, they are done with it. But naming a fire is not the same as walking out of the building. You can stand in the smoke, describing the flames perfectly, and still burn. This is why you can read every quote about self-worth, every post about boundaries, and still find yourself typing the first 3 words of a text you know you should not send. The intellect agrees with your healing. The nervous system has not been informed yet. And the nervous system does not read quotes. It only responds to repetition, to the same choice made over and over, until a new pattern finally outweighs the old one. Consciousness is the slow, unglamorous work of teaching your body what your mind already knows. It is choosing the silence one more time than the ache asks you to, and then one more time after that, and then again tomorrow. That is not weakness. That is the actual muscle Jung was describing when he talked about becoming a separate, integrated person instead of a collection of old reactions running on autopilot. This is also why healing rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It looks like an unanswered phone. It looks like a birthday you did not show up to. It looks like a Sunday you spent alone instead of performing forgiveness you did not actually feel yet. It looks boring, quiet, almost invisible, and that is exactly how you know it is real. There is a version of you that has read every book, listened to every podcast, highlighted every paragraph about self-worth, and still flinches every time that name shows up on the screen. That is not a failure. That is the exact gap between intelligence and consciousness, playing out in real time, in your own chest. The books gave you the map. Only repetition builds the road. Nobody films the moment you did not pick up the phone. Nobody claps for the message you started typing and deleted instead. But that deleted message is the whole video. That is the individuation Jung spent his career describing, happening in a bedroom, alone, with no audience, no proof, no applause. Here is why this is harder than it should be. You are not just fighting your own longing. You are fighting a crowd. Jung wrote extensively about what he called the mass mind, the way human beings default to the values, judgments, and comfort of the group, often without noticing they have done it at all. Groups do not like exits. An exit is a question mark hanging over everyone who stayed. So when you leave a toxic dynamic, the people around it, family, mutual friends, sometimes even strangers online, will apply pressure to pull you back into place. Not because they hate you. Because your absence is uncomfortable for them. They didn't mean it like that. You're overreacting. Family is family. You used to be so close, what happened to you? Everyone has problems, why are you the only one making a big deal out of it? Every one of those sentences is doing the same job. Restoring the group's comfort by dissolving your boundary. This is mass psychology at the smallest possible scale, one living room, one group chat, one holiday dinner where your empty chair says more than you ever could. And it works on most people because most people were trained from childhood to treat the group's approval as more real than their own experience. Think about how early that training starts. A child learns fast that agreement gets rewarded and difference gets punished, even quietly, even with something as small as a look across the table, a sigh, a change in tone. By adulthood, that lesson has become invisible. It just feels like keeping the peace, like being the reasonable one, like not wanting to cause drama. Guilt, in this context, is rarely a moral signal. It is a social alarm. It goes off not because you did something wrong, but because you stepped outside a pattern the group depends on to keep functioning the way it always has. Jung would say the mass mind survives by making individuality feel like betrayal. It punishes the exception because the exception exposes the rule. The second you understand that, the guilt starts sounding less like truth and more like noise, familiar noise, inherited noise, but noise. You are allowed to disappoint a system that was only ever comfortable when you were smaller than you are now. Here is a question worth sitting with. Whose comfort have you been mistaking for your own peace? Because those are not the same thing, and confusing them is exactly how good people end up spending years inside situations that were quietly costing them everything. The mass mind does not need you to agree. It only needs you to stay quiet, stay reachable, stay available for the next round of pressure. The moment you stop being available on demand, the group has to face something it has been avoiding, its own dependence on your compliance. That is a lot for a group to face all at once, so it usually reaches for the simplest story available, that you changed for the worse instead of the harder, truer one, that the group needed you unchanged. There is a deeper reason people push back this hard, and it has almost nothing to do with you. It has to do with what your decision forces them to look at. Jung talked about the human mind's built-in resistance to uncomfortable truth, especially truth that threatens identity. When you walk away from something that hurt you and you do it calmly, without collapsing, without begging for their understanding, you are proof that it was possible. You are proof that someone could have left, that someone could have said enough and meant it and kept meaning it 3 months later. For anyone still inside a version of that same pattern, still explaining away the same kind of treatment, still telling themselves it is not that bad, your peace is not inspiring. It is threatening. It asks a question they are not ready to answer. If they could leave, why haven't I? So instead of asking that question, the mind does something faster, something easier, something that does not require looking inward at all. It attacks the messenger. It calls you cold. It calls you selfish. Because it is easier to make you the problem than to admit the relationship, the family pattern, the friendship was. This is not a personal failure of the people around you. It is a defense mechanism as old as the psyche itself, older than either of you, older than the relationship that taught it to you. It shows up in families, generation after generation, the same accusation passed down like an heirloom nobody asked for. It shows up in friend groups, the moment one person starts asking for something the others are not ready to give. It shows up online in comment sections, aimed at strangers who dare to describe a boundary out loud. The shape changes. The mechanism does not. Once you can name it, it starts losing its grip on you almost immediately, the way any trick loses its power the moment you can see exactly how it works. Jung named the part of the mind responsible for this the shadow, everything a person refuses to see in themselves, pushed out of awareness and then unconsciously projected onto someone else. When someone calls your self-protection selfishness, look closely at what they are actually defending. Usually it is their own inability to do what you just did. The shadow does not announce itself. It disguises itself as concern, as loyalty, as just being honest with you. I'm just worried you're becoming a different person. I'm just saying you didn't used to be like this. Translation sometimes underneath, I need you to stay the same because your change makes my staying the same unbearable to look at. This is why the label selfish gets thrown at people who set boundaries far more often than it gets thrown at people who violate them. Think about that for a second. The person who quietly disappeared from your life for months, no explanation, no apology, is rarely called selfish. But the person who says, I need space and here is why, gets that word thrown at them like an accusation, like a verdict. It is projection working exactly as designed. Redirecting discomfort outward instead of examining it inward, protecting the accuser from ever having to sit with their own part in it. You do not owe anyone a debate about their own shadow work. You are not responsible for healing the discomfort your growth creates in someone who refuses to grow with you. That discomfort belongs to them. Let them carry it. You have carried enough for both of you already, for longer than was ever fair. Notice too how rarely the accusation comes with a real question attached to it. Nobody says, help me understand why you needed to protect yourself. They just skip straight to the verdict because the verdict is faster than the reflection, and reflection is exactly what the shadow is built to avoid. You are not required to argue someone out of their own projection. You are only required to know clearly that it is theirs. The second you try to defend yourself against it point by point, you have already stepped into a debate that was never really about the facts, and never really winnable because the goal was never truth, it was always compliance. This is the part almost nobody prepares you for. The price. Individuation is not free. Jung was honest about this in a way most modern self-help avoids. Becoming a separate, conscious individual often means becoming more alone, at least for a while, sometimes for longer than you would like. Not because something is wrong with you. Because fewer people can meet you at the depth you are now operating from. Independent thought is inconvenient to a system built on compliance. A person who no longer needs the group's approval is much harder to manipulate, harder to guilt, harder to quietly control through obligation, through guilt, through the quiet threat of disapproval. That is exactly why it costs something. The old friendships built on you always agreeing thin out. The family dynamics built on you absorbing the tension stop working the way they used to. The relationships that only survived because you kept shrinking. And sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once, sometimes in a single conversation you will remember for years. Some of these endings will look from the outside like nothing happened at all. No fight, no dramatic scene, no final blow-up. Just a slow fading of replies, a birthday that quietly stopped being marked, a group chat you left without announcing it. That is often what real change looks like from the outside. Unremarkable, easy to miss, easy for others to misread as coldness instead of what it actually is, a nervous system finally choosing itself. This is the part that feels like loss, and honestly, some of it is. You are allowed to grieve people you had to leave, even people who hurt you. Grief and rightness are not opposites. You can miss someone and still know with total clarity that going back would undo everything you just built brick by brick at real cost. But here is the reframe Jung's work offers quietly underneath all of it. This solitude is not punishment. It is the space individuation needs to finish its work. Think of it less like exile and more like a room that finally has enough silence in it for you to hear your own voice again clearly for maybe the first time. Most people will never build the version of themselves you are building right now, precisely because they cannot survive this stretch of quiet. They go back before the silence teaches them anything. They fill the space with the first familiar voice that offers to end it, even if that voice is the one that hurt them. You do not have to. The silence is uncomfortable not because it is empty but because it is honest, maybe for the first time in a long time, and honesty at first always feels a little like grief. Give it time. The same silence that feels unbearable in week 1 starts to feel like breathing room by week 10. Not because the missing goes away completely, but because it stops being the loudest thing in the room. Something else moves in to take its place, slowly, the way furniture fills an empty apartment. A version of you that is not constantly negotiating with old ghosts. A version of you that can sit in a quiet evening without reaching for a phone to fill it. That version was always in there. It just could not surface while the old noise was taking up all the space. Give it the room it has been asking for and watch what starts to grow there instead. So how do you carry this without becoming exactly what you were trying to escape? cold, superior, closed off to everyone who reaches for you? This is the line Jung was careful to draw, and it matters more than almost anything else in this video. Lucidity is not the same as contempt. Seeing clearly does not require despising the people who cannot see yet. Awareness without compassion curdles into something ugly, a kind of quiet superiority that replaces one prison with another, just a more comfortable one, dressed up as growth. The goal was never to become untouchable out of pride. The goal is to become discerning out of self-respect. There is a difference between protecting your peace and performing your evolution for an audience. One is quiet. The other needs witnesses, needs applause, needs someone to confirm it happened. You do not need anyone to watch you heal to know that it is real. You do not need the people who hurt you to admit it, apologize for it, or even understand it for your boundary to be valid. Staying lucid without arrogance means holding two things at once: I will not go back, and I do not need to hate you to mean that. It means you can wish someone well from a distance without inviting them any closer. It means the door can be closed without being slammed, without a speech, without a final performance of how wronged you were. That is the hardest, most honest form of strength Jung's psychology points toward. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that does not need permission, an audience, or a final argument to feel complete. You will know you have found it when you can think about the person who hurt you without your whole body bracing for impact. Not because you forgot. Because it finally stopped being about them, and started being about the life you are building without them in it. So here is the choice, and it really is this simple. You can keep proving your love by returning to the places that taught you to shrink. Or you can prove your growth by staying gone. There is no version of healing that runs through the same door that hurt you over and over, hoping this time it opens differently. The label selfish was never really about you. It was about what your absence exposes in the people still standing in that room, still waiting for a version of you that no longer exists. Let them call it selfish. Call it something else. Call it the first honest boundary you have ever kept for longer than a week. Call it the beginning of the version of you that does not have to shrink to be loved. Call it the first chapter of a story where you are not the supporting character in someone else's comfort. Whatever you call it, do not call it a mistake, because it was never that. If this meant something to you, subscribe, because the next video goes even deeper into what individuation costs, and what it gives back once the silence finally does its work. You already know which door you are not walking back through. Now prove it.